So I've talked about Reagan before. I've talked about Nixon before, about these kind of things. Like, what have they said about the Russians? And here I want to show you what President Bush, George W. Bush, said about isolationism and protectionism. Before I do that, I want to set the table a little bit, and I want to look at this. Like, so I posted this yesterday, explainer about Liberation Day. Liberation Day is what Trump called these new tariffs that are coming out. It's Liberation Day in America, and try to make it look like it was this great thing. His bald eagles on his, just behind him in his shoulder, behind his shoulders. And here I showed this video where Johnny and Ronald Reagan agree. I'm going to show you a little bit of what Ronald Reagan said, just a little bit, just like 10 seconds worth.
And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery.
Okay, so that's Reagan talking about it. And then here, Michael McFaul was saying, hey, I really admire Mike Pence for speaking up about this. And Mike Pence said that the Trump tariff tax is the largest peacetime tax hike in U.S. history. These tariffs are nearly 10 times the size of those imposed during the Trump-Pence administration and will cost American families over $3,500 per year. Check out Spoiling America's Golden Age and at American Freedom. Okay, so, and he calls it a Trump tariff tax. Okay, so it is a tax. Peter Navarro was on the news the other day talking about how this is a tax cut. It's going to be no, there's no way that a tariff is going to be a tax cut. The idea is protectionism, to try to protect your own local industry or your own domestic industry at the expense of, now that helps the industry, but it's at the expense of all the consumers who would otherwise buy an alternative because the alternative is better in their minds. Okay, and then I showed you in the three big stories, I showed you how Rand Paul was talking about when McKinley put tariffs on in 1890, they lost 50% of their seats. When Smoot-Hawley put their tariffs in the 1930s, we lost the House and the Senate for 60 years. So it's bad economically and it's bad politically. Well, here's George W. Bush weighing in on what's happening philosophically in the geopolitical space in America. And it's very interesting. It's enlightening. Let's listen to this.
What's interesting about our country, if you study history, is that there are some isms that occasionally pop up. One is isolationism, and its evil twin protectionism, and its evil triplet nativism.
Okay, and that's where we are. We are in the Trump administration in an isolationist kind of posture, and we've just gone headlong into protectionism with these tariffs yesterday and nativism.
So if you study the 20s, for example, there was an American First policy that said, "Who cares what happens in Europe?" Well, what happened in Europe mattered. Eventually, because of World War II. There was Smoot-Hawley, which was a part of an economic policy, which basically said we don't want trade. In other words, let's throw up barriers. And there was an immigration policy that I think during this period argued we had too many Jews and too many Italians, therefore we should have no immigrants. And my point to you is we've been through this kind of period of isolationism, protectionism, nativism. I'm a little concerned that we may be going through the same period.
Yeah, we might be going through that same kind of cycle of that kind of philosophical thought. Now, Bush is not for that. Reagan's not for that. But Trump and MAGA seems to be for that. Okay, when we're just looking up tariffs, I saw this in real time at the exact moment that Trump's talking about his tariffs, the market started cratering. And when you're looking at the S&P today, this is the S&P 500. Trump comes into office on January 20th, so let's start at January 21st. This is where the economy was in the first few weeks, and then he started doing these kind of things. And then this is just yesterday, it's just dropping like a rock. Okay, so I saw this meme and I thought, yeah, pay the tariffs, Trump says. And he's talking to penguins. We'll be taking our business elsewhere. Well, why is he talking to penguins? You'll find out if you watch Three Big Stories, because I talked about it. It's really incredible just what a hot mess this whole thing is and how the tariffs are playing just playing havoc with international relations at a time when we're trying to sort out a ceasefire, and is NATO going, or is the U.S. going to be part of NATO or not part of NATO? You got to watch these three big stories. And I would also argue that it would be really worth your time if you don't understand the tariffs to watch Explainer on Liberation Day. In fact, watch this next. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.